our webinar with several speakers from the UK, and the topic today is how to escape from corporate life and start your own business. And we have a few entrepreneurs here who call themselves doctorpreneurs, and I found this kind of awesome word to keep on my list of special words. Today with me, I will have Vilma Hamladze. She is the leader of goglobal world in the United States. And she is part of our team for already a year. And she has an excellent expertise in starting companies. She also an investor, and she has expertise in medtech as well. Vilma, please introduce yourself and please introduce the speakers.
Hello, everybody. It's really my honor to be here today with all of you from all over the world. I know that people are joining from United States, from Europe, and Asia. So I know that people like Sam, Farzana, and Amy, they are very busy people. They are entrepreneurs and they are doctors at the same time. So for me, it's a big honor to have them as speakers and to enjoy listening to the story, successful story, and story of success. So actually, myself, what I'm doing, I'm expert in artificial intelligence in healthcare and the health industry, and I'm working with quite a few companies to advise what path to follow and how to connect IT with healthcare. So it's, like I said, it's my pleasure. And Amy, scene is yours. Please introduce your team.
Thank you. So I'm Amy. I'm going to share the screen and start showing the slides. And first of all, I'm going to be telling you about the journey of Hexarad and how we came to be entrepreneurs and how we started our company. And then Sam's going to take over. He's going to talk to you about some of the practical problems we've come across and had to try and solve working within healthcare. And Farzana is going to finish off talking about tips that we've learned along the way and some key lessons from our experience. So just want to say, oh, my slides aren't working. Technical errors all around. So I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, to Go Global World for inviting us to participate in this webinar. And I hope that our story encourages others to follow their startup goals and journey, and hopefully listening to some of our mistakes prevent you from making them yourselves. So I hope you find it useful. So just who we are, first of all. So the company we formed is called Hexarad. It's a radiologist-led teleradiology company with a difference. So teleradiology is the reporting of medical imaging, so CT, X-ray, MRI, that's done remote from where the scan was taken. And the four founders of Hexarad, so myself, Sam, Farzana, and we've got a fourth founder, Jay, who couldn't be with us today. We are all doctors and radiologists. We met actually whilst we were working as doctors and training to become consultant radiologists. That's the equivalent of attending for the US system. I'm not sure of the equivalent term in other healthcare systems. But whilst we were training, we realized that we had a similar vision for how we wanted our working lives to go in the future. We'd all had portfolio careers, so we'd all done something else alongside our medical training. And whilst we were working as doctors, I spent 10 years working at the British Medical Journal as an associate editor. Sam's got the strangest career path of all of us, because he was actually a structured product commodities trader in oil and gas in the city before then retraining as a doctor, becoming a breast radiologist, and now he's the CFO in our startup. Farzana has had multiple different aspects in her career. She has been involved in digital health and strategy and AI and ethics in national boards across the UK, and has done some consultancy work and has always had a portfolio career. And then our other founder, Jay, along with Sam, have founded another startup, which was radiology interview skills preparation to help junior doctors apply to get into radiology training in the UK. So we obviously had similar, I guess, not really a vision at that time, but we all like to do different things. And I think the idea of doing one job for the rest of our lives doesn't excite us in a way, and we wanted to do more with our working lives. So whilst we were training to be radiologists, we saw the gap in the market, I guess, that teleradiology is a business that already happens within the UK and globally. That's because there's a global shortage of radiologists, so the people who can report the scans. And although there have been lots of efforts to plug the gap in capacity there by things like skills mix with other healthcare professionals reporting scans, it hasn't really filled the gap. It takes about 15 years to train to become a radiologist after medical school. So quite a long time, which means you can't just plug the gap with workforce easily. So teleradiology has been quite an important part of healthcare for probably around 10 years now. But there are very few players in the market because it's quite a difficult area to get into. There are a lot of barriers to entry, sort of high cost and various other things. And a lot of the existing companies had been around since the beginning, and were doing things slightly differently to how we would want to work if we were radiologists working for these big corporations. And we thought we had an idea to be able to do something different ourselves by using technology and understanding the way that radiologists want to work to provide our mission statement, which is to create excellence in medical imaging. And just to give you an idea of the scale of the market, in the UK, the NHS spends almost £200 million a year on teleradiology, and globally that figure is in the billions, and it's growing because the demand of medical imaging and scanning is increasing by about 10% every year, and the workforce gap is actually getting wider because we're not training enough people are retiring and people are starting to work part-time. So this is the four of us. Jay, who's the third picture along, who unfortunately isn't with us today. And this slide really is just to tell you about how I've already mentioned our visions and the way we work and our ambitions, and just the fact that we're, I guess, fidgety people. We're always wanting to be doing something, kind of brought us together, because I don't think you can go through the journey of a startup without enjoying hard work and being excited by challenges and opportunities and small successes making you happy, and overcoming problems and solving problems. That's kind of the ethos that we shared as founders. And there were originally 6 of us. We lost a couple of people along the way who didn't think it was a good fit for them to dedicate so much of their time to working in a startup. And what happened very naturally for us, which I think is really, really good, is that our group have found very natural roles within our company. So Farzana is our CEO. She's the bravest of us all. She was the first to leave her job in the NHS and become full-time in our startup. And she has the big picture strategic thinking ideas, and actually was her idea in the first place for us all to get together and try and do something different within the radiology space. So very natural fit for Farzana to be our CEO. And then Sam, with his previous career, he's apparently done some accountancy training as well, and his just absolute love of spreadsheets means that he is a natural fit to be our CFO. And he has a really, for our position in the startup, his understanding of finances has been really, really helpful. Jay's our COO. He's like a young person tech wizard, and I say that because he is the youngest of the group by quite a number of years. I won't say how many, but he has that whatever generation X, Y, Z. I'm not sure what he would fit into. I don't know where we all are, but he has that brain of young people where he can just pick up tech really easily. He built our first website. He does all of these things really, really well. And then on top of that, he's got this old man side of him where he's very process driven, very particular about things, and a bit of a perfectionist, which means in his role as CEO, he's absolutely perfect. And then everybody fit into those nice roles. And I was kind of the leftover choice for CCO, which actually has worked out quite well. It was something that none of us had ever done anything in that realm before. So that was, for me, quite a scary role to fit into because I didn't know anything about it, but I understood the radiology space really well, and I have a great team supporting me, and I've learned a lot along the way, and I talk a lot, which has been very helpful in the CCO role. And so one of the key lessons, I guess, from that, I mean, I might be speaking over what Farzana is going to come to later, is just that having a good team around you is really important, and having people who can fulfill roles that you need people to do, and that you all fit and complement each other with your skill set. So Farzana and I are quite similar in the way we think, and you know, we want things done quickly. We're very impatient, and we're just like, oh, that's fine, it'll do. Whereas Jay and Sam are very particular, very fastidious, make sure everything's done properly. And that combination of our skills and personality types works really well as a group of founders. I think it's obviously very difficult if you're a solo founder. I think the most important thing then is to have a support network, people that you can talk to, and people who can help you on your journey. And throughout our journey, we've had mentors along the way, and we ask all of friends and family for advice. Everybody that I've met through various different entrepreneur programs that I've been a part of always ask for advice. I never want people to think we know the answer to everything, because we're obviously still learning along this journey as well. So just our growth to date. So our company incorporated in 2016, but actually we probably started having conversations about wanting to do something at least a year or so before that. And those conversations don't look anything like what we're doing now. So we had a vision of how we wanted to work, but we didn't know how we were going to get there. And we spent probably a couple of years doing something completely different to what we're doing now, but where we've ended up through, you know, keep trying, keep looking at new avenues until we get to the one that fits us and works well for us. We've incorporated Hexarad in 2016, and so 5 years later we've grown from a team of just 4 founders, bootstrapping and doing everything ourselves, to a team of 16 staff. We've gone from just 2 of the founders being able to report initially, because the other 2 hadn't qualified as consultants yet, to now having a team of 40 radiologists reporting with us. We had 1 site that we were reporting for initially, and now we report for over 40 sites across the UK, going from 0 scans a month to over 10,000 scans a month. And one of the more exciting things in a founder journey that's recently happened for us is we've managed to secure funding to help us scale and grow on the trajectory that we're now aiming for, rapid growth. And the things I said earlier, that we wanted to do teleradiology with a difference, and we've managed that by investing a lot of time and effort rather than money into our technology and our vision for our company and our growth. So a couple of the tools you have to peer review radiology scans, and we've got our own custom built peer review module, and we've built some online platforms and portals for our reporters, so for their experience being part of our company is enjoyable. And we've built a workflow management tool which helps us internally in our company distribute the scans to the right radiologist at the right time, which is quite a difficult thing to do. It's quite a complex problem to work out who's going to report when you've got tens of thousands of scans coming in from various different locations and radiologists scattered around the country reporting remotely, and you have to get those scans reported in a short time frame. And a lot of our competitors do that in a very manual, process-driven way, and human error comes into play. Whereas with Sam's excellent modelling skills, we've managed to start off with what was a spreadsheet and a complex algorithm, and moved that into an app that we have built, and that's continually being improved. And one of Sam's mantras is always do something yourself first. Don't just buy something off the shelf, actually work out what it is that you want, the job it's going to do, and the functionality you need. And that's been really helpful in us in developing our own technology to help us scale and grow at a time where we didn't have any external funding. So a lot of it was just bootstrapped. And then probably one of the other most important aspects of our company is right from the outset, we wanted it to be a place where radiologists wanted to work and do the reporting, but also people wanted to work. So we spent a lot of time and effort thinking about our company culture and our corporate responsibility. This slide just highlights our company values, and we live by these values daily. We discuss them in all of our director board meetings. We talk about how we're living by our values in all of our meetings, so they're always at the forefront of our mind, and we're always doing things to the best of our ability. And that really translates into the staff that we've hired, who all love working at Hexarad, have really nice things to say about us, and also into the reporters who are the radiologists who are reporting our scans, because they're the scarce commodity. So keeping them happy helps keep our business thriving. So I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Sam.
Thanks, Amy. And hi, everyone. So I wanted to talk briefly around some ideas that I had when I was asked to do this talk, about sort of things to think about when you're solving practical problems in the healthcare setting. The ideas are kind of structured around problems that you think are important enough to create a company for instance. So that's the kind of way that I was thinking about this question. And as Amy said, before I became a doctor, I was a structured product trader for a larger oil company. So I had some other skills like building financial models that I kind of assumed would be pretty useless really in medicine. But in actual fact, the opposite seems to have been true. And that's because in my sort of day-to-day work in hospital, I came across so many problems that I managed to find or could think of solutions for. And so in actual fact, having this other experience has been very helpful. So next slide, please. So the three ideas that I wanted to talk about were identifying pain points, doing things that don't scale, and being product obsessed. So next slide. So identifying a pain point. So clearly spending energy, time, and maybe money on a problem that's only causing sort of minor irritation rather than true pain is unlikely to work. And what I mean by unlikely to work is that it's unlikely to be a good foundation for a startup or a new company. So that's one thing to think about. And your solution, and I like, this is a kind of one of my mantras, your solution should ideally be an order of magnitude better than anything else that exists at the moment. So if you think of an idea that, is just only slightly better than an incumbent, it's probably not going to work. So just to give you an example of a problem that I solved in the hospital where I work, I look after the radiology rota, and in my hospital, which is a big hospital in London, there are 50 consultants, about 40 registrars who, by the way, sort of rotate every 3 months. And they're all doing about 40 different sessions with complex pre and post on-call rules for the registrars. So it's a very sort of difficult thing to organize these people. And it used to take the best part of a day to produce a draft rota, and it was done manually. And usually it was just, full of mistakes. So the situation was pretty dire. It was actually affecting the department a lot. No one could rely on the rota. And so it was just, the department was very inefficient. So I decided to build a system that took into account everyone's job plans and the leave to create an accurate draft rota. And it worked pretty well. And I kind of assumed it would just be a stopgap lasting, a few months before they replaced it with a paid-for application. But much to my disappointment, we're still using it today. So yeah, try to concentrate on problems that, if solved, result in significant benefits. So the sort of things to think about are, does it save a lot of time? So going back to my rota example, it used to take, half a day or more to produce draft rota. And now, as long as the inputs are correct, it just takes seconds. I just change the date, I run it, and the rota is produced. And then it needs to be just tinkered with if there are sessions that aren't covered, for instance. And it's important in healthcare, clinician time is precious. And so freeing up time, their time to spend on more valuable activities is a big win. And money, does your products result in significant savings? So using the rota as an example again, we save money because we built our own system, and the hospital doesn't have to pay for third-party software which it used to, and it didn't work, and it was very expensive. And also, we don't have to pay an administrator to run a less efficient system. And then thirdly, quality. So if your product has a tangible output that is significantly better than what you had before, then you've done a good job. So my rotor is basically, it's 100% accurate as long as the inputs are correct. Whereas before, it was riddled with errors because it was done manually. So next slide, please. So yeah, do things that don't scale, which kind of sounds like a mistake, right? But so normally the advice is that when you're creating a product or starting a business, to try and make everything scalable, right? But this isn't always good advice or even possible. So startups and products need their founders and creators to get things going using non-scalable methods. So a good analogy, if you like, is cranking up an old car to get the motor going. So when we started our reporting business, and Amy's kind of already mentioned this, we just had a handful of reporters. So we could allocate our scans almost just by using a few written notes on the back of an envelope. But when we got to 10 reporters, it got harder and we started to make mistakes. So we realized we needed a new system. So I built our first workflow manager in Excel, and that provided our ops team with an allocation dashboard that took into account reporter profiles, subspecialty interests, leave, all those important things. And it worked well for, I think, over a year. I can't remember how long we used it for, but the ops team quite liked it and they became quite attached to it. But then we got bigger and then the same thing happened. So once we hit 30 reporters, it was just too slow, too prone to user degradation. It didn't scale, basically. So we then converted our workflow manager that was based on Excel into a web application, which allowed us to bring in way more functionality. And this system, which, as Amy said, we keep on improving, has now become the bedrock of our distribution system. So would it have just been better then to just build an application before we even started? And I think the answer is definitely no. So this is the point about, doing things that don't seem to scale. There are actually huge benefits to this. So you just gain an awful lot by building the first solution yourself. If I hadn't built the Excel version, I wouldn't have had to think through all the underlying logic, the layout required for a tool like this. And I fixed a lot of the problems up front that we managed to avoid when we built the app because we were already aware of them. And of course, money. When you're fixing problems in the NHS or you're a startup, you usually don't have a load of spare cash lying around just to hire a team of developers to build your perfect scalable solution. So really, you should aim to build what's known as a minimal viable product or MVP, and then iterate to a more refined product from user feedback. Next slide, please. So being product obsessed, one of the things I've definitely noticed is that the everyday business of running a company with a seemingly endless meetings and presentations, admin, making sure people get paid, it can be a real distraction from what is really important, and that is the end product. And crucially, getting into that kind of virtuous, iterative cycle of getting user feedback to improve your product. And of course, to become a great company, you need more than just a great product. But without a great product, you have no chance of succeeding. So, I do think we probably do have too many meetings, too many PowerPoint presentations, and not enough time spent on making the product better. Now, of course, it's easy to say, the dull day-to-day workings of the company, like payroll, for instance, they must work well, otherwise your company will collapse, of course. But spending time on these processes won't result in a great product or a great business. So the challenge is to try and push these tasks to the background so that they work efficiently, but they don't consume too much of your time. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sam. So I'm now going to talk about 6 of the most important lessons we've learned so far. And as Amy said earlier, by no means is it we're at the end and we're kind of reflecting. These are mistakes that we've made along the way. And I think having open and honest conversations like this can help our learning, but also hopefully speed up the journey for the rest of you. So just moving on to the first slide. So Amy touched on this, but really one of the most important lessons we've learned is that building the right team is everything. And when you begin your startup journey, that really is about your founding team. Now, if you're a solo founder, it is much more difficult, I think, on all levels, and particularly with raising investment. But when you pick your founders, it's perhaps they're some of the most important relationships that you're going to have. I certainly speak to the other three more than most members of my family. And as Amy said, we started as a team of 6. And on reflection, 6 is definitely too big for a founding team. We wouldn't advise it. And we quickly realized early on that there were two team members just didn't probably share the same vision or the same drive. And credit to them, having those conversations, they made it very easy. But even having those conversations distracted from the core business, it's really difficult to talk to the rest of, other co-founders about leaving the business or the future of the business. So if you can get it right from the beginning, then that's absolutely key. So really spend time. It's a really, really important relationship. And you have to be, I think, particularly aligned with how you work, certainly your vision for what you want to do, the amount of time commitment you're prepared to give, but also how you communicate when things go wrong and how you react to each other when things go wrong. So that's really, really important. And it's whenever you read any startup book, it's the first thing that people say is you talk to investors, it's the thing that they find really important. And there's a reason for that, because getting that founding team right is really important. So the next point, if we can move on to the next slide, is you'll learn your most important lessons from your biggest setbacks. And this isn't meant to be an Instagram meme, but it's really, really true. The journey isn't smooth, as everybody already knows, but your biggest setbacks are where you learn your biggest lessons. So for us, that came a couple of years ago when we had the opportunity to enter a strategic partnership with a very large multinational company. So we were really excited by the opportunity. We spent the best part of a year negotiating what those terms would be, only at the end for the deal not to work because the company in question just didn't really have the mechanism structures or even funding structures in place to do a deal like this. And so it was really difficult when it didn't work out. And we had to take stock, reevaluate, decide what we wanted to do from that point on. But it actually ended up being the best thing that could have happened for the business because it gave us some space to breathe. We decided what we wanted to do and what kind of partners we wanted to work with. We still are working with that partner really as a client. So that was a very valuable contract that we got. But it gave us a lot of experience with regards to what it's like to negotiate, what it's like to think through a partnership. And when we went through our recent investment round, having that experience was incredibly valuable. So even though at the time it doesn't feel great because you just want the path to be completely smooth, these setbacks are where you really kind of, I think, earn your stripes as a startup. So just keep going. So our third lesson is really about staying focused, but knowing that your definition of success will evolve. So both as Sam and Amy talked about, you start off and you really are thinking about what is the problem that you're trying to solve. Once you've thought about it and it's quite exciting, you start, and actually other opportunities kind of can come into your lap, and it can get easy to start getting a little distracted from your main core purpose. But you only have a limited amount of energy, so you really have to build your kind of core offering, because as you grow, really you want to be able to say, here was a problem and we solved it better. And so staying focused on that is really important, especially in the early stages, and not trying to solve too many problems not very well. But at the same time, helping to solve that problem can open up other opportunities in other markets, and having those conversations with customers can help you better understand the problems that you need to solve and also new problems that come up. And so for us, we've seen that with the workflow management tool that we've developed that Sam talked about, because what we've seen is something that we've developed internally is now something that could help solve the problem of other customers. So quite complementary to our offering. And so that's been really exciting. So that benchmark of success, like everything else in a startup, it keeps on iterating. So it's that balance between staying focused, but also staying open to new ideas. The next point is for us really about fundraising and bootstrapping. So I think we're in a culture now where startup success is very much measured by how much money you've managed to raise. You certainly see that with, company X raised this much at Series A. But, your definition of success as a company is not about your fundraising. It's about your revenue and about eventually your EBITDA and really your, market presence. So it can get easy to be distracted. And that we would advise that bootstrap as much as you can, especially in the beginning. It's really good discipline because it helps you to really, stick it out when things are difficult and you don't have much money. You begin to understand where you should spend your money and where you can do things yourself. And having an investor early on can be really difficult, especially if you're looking at raising money later. When we went to our recent pretty significant fundraising round, we didn't have a cap table with a whole bunch of people on it or other investors who had, we had agreed terms on, and it made it much easier. It also made it much easier because we were already generating revenue by the time we were going to external investment. So the disciplining of bootstrap is really important. Try and keep as much equity as you can, and it will give you a good kind of foundation from which, if you do need to fundraise later, you can go to do. And so one of the things that we found is the soft stuff is very important. And what do we mean by the soft stuff? So things such as your vision, your mission, and your values. And when you first start, you're probably naturally quite aligned with the people you work with regards to values. And you've probably thought a little bit about your vision. But taking the time to really think these through and figure out whether those values are true to what you're doing and they really mean something is really important. And we didn't do that right at the beginning because it feels a little bit vague and difficult. But once you put those down on paper and you agree to it, it is the foundation of your culture going forward. It is what you can, as you bring people on, or even as you talk to customers, you can have a kind of a benchmark of what you're all about. When we look back in retrospect at the two founders who didn't stay with us on our journey, it's quite easy now to see that really our values weren't always completely aligned, and our vision and mission of what we wanted to do wasn't aligned. So spending time at the beginning and doing this exercise, even though maybe it feels a little bit counterintuitive and you just kind of want to get on with things, is really important. It's as you bring on employees and new people, this is the culture and your values. You want to be able to tell them what you're about, and you want them to then exemplify what you're about, because in the end, they will spend more time with your customers than you as well. And this is the final thing, really, something that we're learning as we're expanding now and expanding our teams. But I think the sweet spot within a startup, and really about the people, which is what makes a company, is about having the same values but thinking differently. What you want to avoid is an echo chamber of ideas where you all approach a problem in exactly the same way. You want to be able to sit down and for someone to really ask you what you mean and does that really make sense? But what you don't want to do is sit there and talk about, do you agree with your mission? Do you agree with your value of like being patient-centered? Because those are the kind of standards of what you are. So the area that we're trying to get to as we're expanding our team is really this, having people who think differently, but sharing our values. And we're having to think through how we do that, whether that's, from the recruitment stage through to bringing people on. And recently we're about to bring on a new CTO. And for us to understand that they shared the same values as us was a really important part of bringing them on. So that's probably the final thing with regards to what we've learned.
Thank you very much for sharing such a great story. It's actually, very interesting to listen how you went through and where you are right now. And I think that after, if we're gonna meet after 10 years, you're gonna have next series basically of your story. But this is just beginning, and I'm really looking forward to hear that you are one of the biggest company in the world having this kind of technology and having most of the radiologists working with it. So I really wish you the best. But now we're gonna see if we have any questions from our audience.
Before we start Q&A section, I would like to ask the audience to start typing the questions, and this is the time when the speakers are ready to answer your questions. Just use this opportunity and ask your challenging questions where you really face the problem. We will try to answer, hopefully. And on my end, I also enjoyed it, like really beautiful slides and very nice, interesting story. I think you deserve to be entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, and I completely agree with Wilma. We wish you success. I would like to open this Q&A section with the first question we have. Just a second. So how to get a pilot in the medical industry? Considering that the pilots for startups are really difficult to get, and it's like very hard barrier to enter. So what would be your suggestion? Because as the main question here is like to get traction for investors to prove that the model works. So what would be your answer?
If I'm right in thinking you're talking about the NHS, I think it will be slightly different in other healthcare sectors. And getting pilots can be very difficult. I would say there are a lot of ways now people are promoting innovation within the NHS, and most bigger trusts certainly have champions for innovation, innovation leads, and there are allied healthcare networks specifically for innovation. And then there's NHSX, EEI, all the other government bodies that can help with those things. And all of those things can help. I think you have to spend your time networking, talking, trying to find places that have the problem that you're trying to solve. And when you do find a site that is amenable and willing to work with you on a pilot, I would say it still takes a long time. You have to spend a lot of time talking to them. You have to get very friendly with them. You have to push them when they're not replying to emails, call them. You have to do everything you can to make their life easier. So if there are forms that need to be filled in, you should do as much of that as possible. You will end up having to do most of the work. You can't expect an NHS trust to push it forward for you. And the other thing I'll just say on that point is pilots are really important for proof of concept. But don't get stuck into that never-ending cycle of pilot after pilot after pilot after pilot. At some point, those pilots have to turn into a commercial, entity where you're actually getting some return on your money. So yes, you do need the data, and also you don't have to do a pilot to get the data. There are other ways of getting that. It depends what you're trying to sell and what you're trying to grow. Luckily for us, the market is there for teleradiology. So we had to prove ourselves as why we're different from the competitors, and find people willing, I guess, to take a risk on us as a newbie in the market and prove that we could do it. And if you just start small on one location, if you're working in the NHS as a doctor, nurse, healthcare professional, try in your local area. I didn't do this myself, but I've been advised that sometimes your local politicians can be really helpful as well. If it's a problem that's important to them, they can sometimes advocate on your behalf, although I never went down that route, so I'm not sure. I've heard that it worked for other people. So that would be my advice. I don't know about other healthcare systems, I'm afraid. I think it's very different when it's an insurance model and a commercial model. I think it could be it's a little bit trickier there.
All right. Any other on your team would like to comment on that?
I think just saying kind of what Amy said, I think whatever healthcare system you're in, find a champion who is a clinician, a healthcare worker who can advocate for your product internally, and then be very clear about who the decision makers are. So a good kind of acronym that Amy and I discovered we were on a female founders accelerator, I think is MAN, like who's got the money, who's got the autonomy, and who's got the need. So, everyone that you meet will probably fall into one of those categories, but you need to find the person with the money and the autonomy within the organization to get something through. So, avoid the mistake of just talking to too many people who actually can't make a decision.
Thank you. Vilma, we have a question. Do you want to take it?
To be honest with you, I don't see questions.
Okay, there is a question, how to avoid regulation requirements while you are small. I guess considering that medtech industry is facing a lot of regulations, and while you're small, you can't really scale yourself, and it's so expensive, I guess.
I think that people are talking about certifications and stuff like that. So it's like, guys, do you have any advice? Because I know in the United States you have to be certified to get the software into the like healthcare organization.
In the UK, again, there is regulation, but companies often get over it. We didn't need to do this, but just partnering with research organizations. So, you know, if something is a research project, then it can go down a slightly different route versus needing to get approval first. And certainly this isn't our business model, but certainly the first run of AI companies in the UK, that's how they managed to get their first set of data within kind of the clinical trial setting.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And anybody else? You know, I think the regulations, the problem with the regulation that what I'm facing is that startups are trying to enter specifically United States market. I mean, European market is also highly regulated, though the problem here they are facing is that they have technologies that could improve the market and like maybe bring some innovation, but they need to go through FDA, they need to find money for FDA, they need to prove that this works and go through like lots of steps. Is there any way to actually find maybe a partner or a large organization that could support maybe an accelerator program? Any like tweaks or ideas how they can overcome this? Because software you can just scale. With medtech is not working like that. It's not an easy question.
I mean, I think one of the ways that we got lucky was that we essentially set up a joint venture with a big company that already had all the registrations required. So that meant that there were some things we couldn't avoid, but it meant there were some things we bought ourselves quite a lot of time. So we kind of sat under their umbrella. So that is one model that you can use to not have to get all the regulations ready up front. Okay,
interesting. And we have another question. Just a second. What about just a second. What are the key steps working in the medical industry? Like I don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
Like, starting a company in the medical industry. What are the key steps in your opinion?
It's not really any different to any other industry. I mean, I'm going to answer it quite broadly because I'm not quite sure what they're getting at, but the key steps really is to make sure that your solution or your offering solves a problem for the customer and it's something that the customer wants. As Sam mentioned when he was talking, you know, focus on that solution, make sure that you're in constant communication with who the end product user or the customer is to make, you know, is it actually working how they want it to? Can you improve it? What else would you do? The regulation stuff is probably that we've just discussed is specific to the healthcare market more so than any other. But otherwise, I think it isn't really any different from any other industry. You have to understand it and how it works. And certainly, I guess the procurement within healthcare and certainly in the NHS is very different, and that can be quite difficult and time consuming. So understanding that process, there's not really any way to learn that process other than just to speak to people who've been involved and get going and learn as you go and ask for advice from as many people as possible.
Another question, do you guys suggest any accelerator incubator programs that can help entrepreneurs and that would be efficient in your opinion, so they can use them as to scale or maybe to enter the market? Hello?
Yeah, do you have any in UK? Because I think that what people, I can talk about United States, it's like it's a lot of accelerators, a lot of incubators, which is looking for healthcare innovations. So if you're gonna go on Google and just search, I'm purposely not telling which one exactly to enter, but if you're gonna search, you're gonna find quite a few in different kind of locations. It's Chicago, Atlanta, New York, I know, and of course San Francisco. So check that, and they can help you to go through all mandatory things, and they can introduce you to the bigger companies. I know that even Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, they are constantly looking for the healthcare innovations. So just search and try to apply. And most of the time, I know that they are accepting good ideas. So so basically, this is like part of your research and part of research process, basically. I'm not sure about UK, but this is my answer for United States.
Yeah, the best known ones are the US. Like Y Combinator is probably one of the best known incubators. But it does kind of depend what stage you're at, because Y Combinator, for instance, take a lot of equity for not much money. So if you're already quite far along and you've got good traction with good revenues, and you've got some confidence about your valuation, it may be difficult to accept their terms, which are the same for everyone. So they only really work if you're quite early stage.
There's a couple of healthcare specific ones in the UK. There's the NHS Clinical Entrepreneurs Programme, but you have to be an NHS worker to be on that. So I'm currently on that programme because I'm a doctor in the NHS, and there are nurses, physiotherapists, healthcare professionals on that programme as well. And then there are a couple of other accelerators that are health tech focused. There's the Hill, which has come out of Oxford, which I'm also on. And there is, Farzana mentioned earlier that we did a female founders accelerator, and there are quite a few accelerators coming out now. I've certainly seen more in the last year that are targeting a particular diverse background to try and get diversity within the startup space. So ours was female founders. I've seen some for ethnic minorities, some from low-income countries. So you have to look at the areas that I only really know about the healthcare sector ones, but I'm sure there are some for fintech and other sectors. It would depend what your area of business is as well.
Great. We have some comment that people enjoying this webinar. Thank you guys for your comments. We have another question from mobile apps. What about grants in medtech? Are there any government grants or non-government grants you can use for funding?
There's a lot of things that you can apply for. There's some government tax relief for certain things that you're doing, for like research and development can come under some tax relief. There are government grants. There's one actually opening next week for AI and automated medtech products. And there are research grants, innovation grants. They're all quite competitive, and they're a lot of work to submit the paperwork for. We ended up bootstrapping completely and not going down the grant route, but certainly on the programs I just mentioned that I'm on, the clinical entrepreneur program, there's quite a few startups on there who have been quite successful in getting grant funding to help develop their product in the early stages. There's definitely opportunities out there, but I would say it takes up a lot of time, so you have to put the effort in, because they're also very competitive. If you don't spend the time perfecting the application form, then you won't get in. And I would look to somebody who's applied for grant funding before and ask advice. And someone who maybe has read grant applications, or even somebody who's just used to appraising written documents, would be really helpful to read even somebody who knows nothing about what you're doing. So when I used to work at the British Medical Journal, this was something I would advise to people before they submitted their manuscripts to the journal. Have somebody who knows nothing about what you've written read it and make sure it makes sense to them, because the problem we all have is we understand what we're talking about. We're founders, live, breathe, eat, the same thing all the time, all day, every day. But if I go and talk to Joe Bloggs down the street, am I making sense to them? And it'll be the same thing for somebody appraising you for your grant application or funding application. They have to understand what you're talking about and get what it is that you're so passionate about.
Great. Anybody else?
Actually, I do have questions. So what is your advice when to start your entrepreneurship journey? When you are just right after university, or when you have some experience and understand the problems in the market?
I think it's a bit of a vague answer, but I think it depends. I think there is traditionally this idea that you start your entrepreneurship journey, especially now in the startup world, quite young. So you leave, because people have all watched movies like The Social Network, so you come up with a great idea when you're in university and you leave, and that's what you do. But we've increasingly met people on the entrepreneurship journey who actually have done something first. So I'd say if you're straight out of university, you've got a brilliant idea, absolutely go for it. You're going to have energy, you're going to have time, you're not going to be weighed down by salary expectations, so you're going to be kind of used to being broke, so that's good. But if you are further along in your career and you are now beginning to wonder whether you should take that leap, then we would obviously all say do it. If you've got a good idea and you think you can add value and your space, you're already going to be much further ahead. So don't almost get intimidated by the fact that you're a bit further along and maybe a little bit older. Like as Sam said, all the experiences you have help you at the stage of life that you're in. So I guess I'm speaking more to someone who's perhaps older and a bit more established in their career, and maybe they're kind of weighing things up. If you have a good idea, then just go for it. When we started, one of the things that Sam said to us, actually, which was really useful, he said, even if we do nothing, we'll just learn a lot. And actually that was probably the best way for us to start that journey, which was something will come of this. And it's definitely given us a lot more than I think we originally thought it would.
Just sort of add to that, I think one of the sort of factors that's really important is risk, right? And obviously your risk profile changes as you get older. So the thing about doing it when you're younger is that it's much easier to take the risks, right? Because there's not much you can lose. It's unlikely that straight out of university, for instance, you'd have got to particularly senior positions. So that makes it a lot easier versus if you're down the line, you've got responsibilities, children, family, mortgage, car payments, all those normal things. That makes it much harder to take a risk where, for instance, you would have to put a significant amount of money, or you would have to give into the business, or you would have to give up your job. So I definitely think people overestimate the risk when they're younger. Like that's the best time to do it. The problem often is that the ideas that form companies come out of your work. So you start your job, and that's when you kind of realize that actually something's not working well. So maybe it is helpful in a way to have started your working career, because that's when sometimes the opportunities present themselves. So it's a balance, but it becomes harder to set up a startup the older that you get because of your risk profile.
Just to add to that, I think the average age of a successful startup founder is 45. So if you are later on in your life, don't be scared, because if you're willing to take the risk, then it's probably because you've thought about it and you have got a really good idea. I think what we see in the media and on social media platforms are the really successful startups that come from younger people. So Facebook, for example, Mark Zuckerberg was at university when he invented that. They're the ones that people see and hear about a lot. But the other startups that are very successful and their founders are more mature, you probably just don't know about them. But more of those are successful than the younger ones, I think. I think having a bit of experience is helpful to understand the problem that you're solving. But, there's always going to be the unicorn style Mark Zuckerberg 18-year-old who can become a billionaire from their idea. So, you've just got to go for it.
Yeah, you just started this yourself, but I wanted to make it unexpected, but seems like it's like very logical questions to ask about your failures. And this famous question, let's talk about your fuck ups, if I may ask like that. Because personally, for myself, I failed a lot. And one of my personal ones, one of the first company I started, I almost raised a large round of funding, but I completely failed. And I totally failed it because I failed with the basic thing with the team. And because of that, we actually, our startup just vanished. And it was very painful. And I started many other companies after that, and they are successful. But that was a hard thing to accept, What is your failure? What was your failures and how did you solve it?
I see things, I always get laughed at amongst the founding team for being unbelievably optimistic. And I don't even see our failures as failures. I see it as just another step in the journey. Everything that we've done, as Farzana mentioned earlier, and Sam, we learn from everything. So even when Farzana mentioned the deal that fell through, I didn't even really see that as a failure at the time. Even looking back, I can't remember being that bothered by it because I just had so much belief in what we were doing and that we would be successful anyway, that it didn't bother me. But one of the earlier ones I can think of is we did spend a lot of time, I spent a lot of time, it's probably my failure, on a small private company that we were potentially doing ultrasound for. And it was difficult, time consuming, not scalable, not really solving a problem. It was just us trying to find our feet in the market and see what it was that we were trying to do. And that didn't really fail. It just kind of fell by the wayside and we got distracted by other things. Sam is the realist in our group, so he will be able to list our failures, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that comes to mind is recruitment, where the first few people that we hired, so we had some operations staff, but then when we started getting bigger, we hired a few people, and we hadn't really put enough thought into the sort of onboarding process, training, how to make that experience good for the person. And if you think about it, it's critical, right? It's their first impression of the company. And I think that stung all of us, actually, that the people that joined did not have like a good experience. But we learned really quickly, and we completely changed things. And the next time we hired a group of people, it went really, really well, and they're all really happy. So that's just the classic thing, learn from your mistakes and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I was going to talk about, quite early on in the business, we kind of talked about this idea that we've got lots of radiologists and we're allocating scans, and we didn't have a robust process for it right at the beginning. So we found that we weren't meeting client expectations. And that, in fact, is what helped us develop the tool that we now have in place. But it's definitely a bit of a baptism of fire when you learn in that way, when you're like, okay, something's not working, we just have to pivot and we have to find a solution for it. But, as we've kind of said, through each of those, you learn quite a lot. And I think one of the biggest things is that if you can lose your fear of failure, then you can push yourself to be a bit braver. So, you know, if you want some of the biggest things that I think set people back, particularly if you're, you know, a perfectionist, you're a type A personality or a high achiever, is the idea of doing something and it not working out just feels so disastrous that sometimes people don't even really start. But if you can let go of that and just accept it will just happen, unfortunately, and it's going to suck, but you're going to get through it, you know, nothing is forever, then it helps you just to be a bit braver.
Yeah, you definitely have to get used to the concept that the default for any startup is death, you know, and that's always around the corner for the first few years. And it's true, it's sort of still true now, right? You know, it wouldn't take much to, so you just have to, yeah, you just have to survive in the early stages and just accept that that's the way things are.
We have one comment on the live stream. Great examples about your failures. Be brave and accept the risk and move on.
Yeah, but I would like to say, you know, that difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. So I think that this is what we are looking for. When we see that light at the end of the tunnel, we know that this is what we want to see, and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, in the end of the day, you cannot really learn from the book what is entrepreneurship until you start doing it, and so it's actually who you are. To me, as I understand it, it's like your personal fight with yourself. And once you try to build something, all of a sudden you like open up all your weaknesses, and you have to face them and solve it for yourself. And before we finish our webinar. I have another practical question from one of entrepreneur who is working on application for autistic children or people. They created augmented reality for autistic children, and their question is how can they fundraise if they already have some let's say 80 people successfully using their technology, and it's really helping those autistic people. They are based in Europe and they are willing to scale, but they don't have enough resources to finish the product and scale it. So what would be your recommendations in this regard?
So I guess, I mean, we've just gone through the fundraising process ourselves. So I guess, first of all, being very clear about, before you even go to the fundraising route, just exactly, go back, what's your problem? What's your solution? How do you add value? If you've got 80 people using the product, that's great. Get as many kind of user testimonials, any data points you can that your product works, do the background, your market research. When you go to funders, you can, go down the angel route and the institutional route. The angel route might be a little easier in the beginning, certainly. You might have people who believe in your product and what it can do, but whether it's an angel or an institution, they really want to understand that you're going to add value in the kind of size of the market. So really drill down into that, know your competition, know your costs, look at your projected revenue going forward. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of iterations, get other people to look at it. Once you have that in place, then depending on the geography you're in, most people who invest will invest within a particular geography. There's no point going to an American VC if you're based in Europe. They're unlikely to invest. So then just, you can kind of probably divide it into, whether you have equity investment, whether you're looking at some kind of debt instrument, or whether, you can even get by on a grant. It can be really good in the beginning if you want to, raise the first thing to even just do a friends and family round. So if you've got some, traction and you've demonstrated some good things and people buy into your product, that would be great. And also we didn't go down this route, but crowdfunding, particularly for a product like that, might be something that, you could get quite a lot of traction for, because it sounds like, it sounds as though it could be a really interesting story to tell. And one of the things we've seen through investment is it is just about weaving a narrative and a story, and really making it quite personal as to why your product is important to you, as well as why it's important for the end user.
And just to add to that, I think that's all really good advice, is to try and think about, because what you want to achieve is you want to get to the next sort of meaningful milestone, right? So it's not just about getting, okay, how much money do I need to create $100 million company or something? That's not the way to think about it. The way to think about it is, how much money do I need to get to the next meaningful milestone, which will then mean that I can then go, for instance, to, you know, a VC with a much stronger case than I've got now. And it might not be as much as you think. So if you could get, you know, £200,000 from a group of angels or crowdfunding, that might be enough to take you to the next milestone. So try to break it down in that way.
I like your suggestion about crowdfunding. I think that might be actually for this specific product might be a good one, because it helps people and there is already a result of happy people. And they can create a good story about that for crowdfunding campaign. I agree with you. Our audience attended from all around the world, but starting with our speakers, we already have speakers from the United States, United Kingdom, and Eastern Europe. And at the same time, we have startups who registered to this event from primarily from the United States, India, some other countries, and also Eastern Europe, and some from Australia. I'm really excited about this global talk, and I really appreciate sharing your expertise. And I suggest to close this in a unusual way, like not just saying bye to everyone, but maybe what's on your heart right now, or what's your final thoughts, like final outcome. Maybe just bye is fine as well, but maybe you have something more to our audience to say before you go. And this is how I suggest we wrap it up. Sam?
Okay, I'll start. So don't be scared, just go for it.
Thank you.
I would say stay happy, and the way to stay happy is to have the support of your co-founders and your friends and family around you, and make sure you look after yourselves, because it's a very long, stressful, tiring journey, and you have to take time out for yourself every now and then. When you go on holiday, actually go on holiday, turn your phone off.
And Farzana?
That having a startup is like one big game of chicken. You just need to like have a good idea and just go for it. And if you keep at it, you'll get there.
And by the way, I spoke with Guy Kawasaki and asking the same question in 2015, and he said, like, go for it. Exactly like that. Vilma, and your final words.
You know, I'm listening and I'm enjoying each word. And from smart people, we're getting smarter world, and especially from doctors. So it's really big thank you to all of you.
And that was Hexarad startup, or a company already, I would say, Sam, Farzana, and Amy. And we were talking about escaping from corporate career to build a successful startup. I think it was an amazing talk. It's truly international, and I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, guys. And for everyone who watched us, please subscribe to our channel, give us a like, leave us a comment, ask more questions, and we will reach out to the speakers. And for you guys, have a great the rest of the days, and thank you so much. See you. Goodbye.
Thank you.